5,000 years ago, while most of the world was still learning to build walls, one civilization was already writing laws. Before Rome existed. Before Athens had a democracy. Before a single word of the Bible was written. There was Persia. And here is the thing almost no history textbook slows down long enough to tell you. Persia still exists. Not as a ruin. Not behind museum glass. Not as a myth whispered in archaeology lectures. As a living nation. With a language. A memory. An identity that has survived every empire that ever tried to erase it. The Greeks came. The Arabs came. The Mongols came. The Turks came. Every few centuries, a new superpower would sweep across the ancient world and plant its flag on Iranian soil. And every single time, without exception, Iran absorbed them. Outlasted them. Or quietly converted them into something Persian. Sit with that for a moment. Not once. Not twice. Every single time. This is not mythology. This is not national pride. This is one of the most well-documented patterns in all of human history. So the question is, how? How does a civilization get conquered over and over again for 5,000 years, and still stand? The answer is not what most people expect. And by the end of this, it will change the way you think about what power actually means. To understand why no empire could destroy Iran, you have to start where every story starts, with the land itself. The Iranian plateau stretches across 1.5 million square kilometers, ringed on almost every side by mountains. And at its heart? Two of the most inhospitable deserts on earth. If you were a conqueror in the ancient world, Iran was not a country you simply marched into. The land itself was the first enemy. But geography alone does not explain this story. What happens next goes far deeper. And it starts almost 5,000 years ago, in a region of southwestern Iran called Elam. Elam was one of the first literate civilizations on Earth. While most of humanity kept records in memory and oral tradition, the Elamites were writing. They had cities. They had laws. Trade networks stretching across the ancient Near East. Their capital, Susa, was a metropolis when most of the world was still made of villages. Here is the first thing to understand about Iran: it did not become sophisticated. It was born sophisticated. By 678 BCE, a people called the Medes had risen to dominate the plateau. They did something remarkable. They allied with the Babylonians, and in 612 BCE, they destroyed Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire. At the time, the most feared military power in the known world. The Medes were not getting lucky. They were the foundation on which the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen would be built. But no one, not even the Medes, could have predicted what was coming next. His name was Cyrus. History would call him the Great. In 550 BCE, Cyrus unified the Medes and the Persians into a single state. Within 20 years, he had built something the world had never seen before. An empire stretching from the Aegean coast to the borders of India. But the size of what he built? That's almost beside the point. What Cyrus did next is what sets this story apart from every other conquest in the ancient world. When Cyrus took Babylon in 539 BCE, one of the great cities of the ancient world, he did not burn it. He did not enslave its people. He did not tear down its temples. Instead, he issued a declaration, inscribed on a clay cylinder, proclaiming that all peoples under his rule were free to practice their own religions, speak their own languages, and keep their own customs. The Jews, held in captivity in Babylon, were freed. He let them return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The Hebrew Bible records Cyrus as a liberator, one of the very few foreign rulers spoken of with reverence in its pages. A Persian king. Recorded with gratitude in a Hebrew text. That is not conquest. That is something else entirely. This was not weakness. This was strategy of the highest order. An empire that does not exhaust its self-crushing resistance, is an empire that lasts. After Cyrus came Darius the Great. Where Cyrus was a conqueror and liberator, Darius was a builder and organizer. He divided the empire into 20 provinces, built roads, standardized coinage, created a postal system, and in the mountains near modern Shiraz, he began construction of a ceremonial capital so magnificent it would become one of the great architectural wonders of the ancient world. He called it Persepolis. The Achaemenid Empire at its height, 50 million people. Roughly 40% of the entire world population. At the time. An empire built not just on military power, but on the most sophisticated administrative machine the ancient world had ever produced. And then, in 330 BCE, a young Macedonian king marched his army across the Hellespont. And the world held its breath. His name was Alexander. History calls him the Great as well, though Iranians remember him somewhat differently. Alexander crushed the Persian army at Gaugamela in 331 BCE. He marched into Persepolis, the heart of Persian civilization, and set the great palace complex on fire. Persepolis burned. The Achaemenid dynasty ended. On paper, Persia was destroyed. But here is the part that gets left out of most accounts. The part that changes everything. Alexander, who had been taught by Aristotle, who fancied himself heir to the Persian throne, began to adopt Persian customs. He wore Persian dress. He incorporated Persian nobles into his court. He married a Bactrian princess. He demanded his generals bow before him in the Persian manner, a practice called proskynesis that horrified them. They saw it as submission fit for slaves, not equals. His own generals nearly mutinied. The man who had come to conquer Persia was, by degrees, becoming Persian himself. Alexander did not destroy Persian civilization. He was seduced by it. When Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BCE, the empire fractured among his generals. The portion covering Iran fell to Seleucus. But the Seleucid dynasty, despite being Greek in origin, found itself running a vast empire using Persian administrators, Persian bureaucratic systems, Persian cultural frameworks. The Iranian plateau was simply too large, too complex, too deeply organized to be run any other way. And within 80 years, a dynasty of Iranian origin had reclaimed the plateau from within, driving the Seleucids westward, reconstituting something that looked very much like the old Persian state. The pattern had announced itself. Conquer Iran, and Iran quietly conquers you back. The dynasty that replaced the Parthians in 224 CE would carry Iran to perhaps its greatest cultural height. His name was Ardashir. A Persian prince from the original heartland of the Achaemenid Empire. When he defeated the last Parthian king, he did not simply declare himself a new ruler. He declared himself the restoration of an ancient idea. The greatest of the Sasanian emperors was Khosrow I, known as Anushirvan, the immortal soul. Ruling from 531 to 579 CE. He reformed the tax system, reorganized the army, built cities, invested in agriculture, and then, in one of the most remarkable acts of intellectual patronage in ancient history, when the Byzantine Emperor Justinian closed the Platonic Academy in Athens and expelled its philosophers, Khosrow offered them refuge at his court. Pause here. The Greek philosophical tradition, Plato, Aristotle, the entire inheritance of classical thought, was preserved in Persia when Europe had no more use for it. That is not a footnote. That is a civilizational turning point. But the Sasanian Empire, for all its brilliance, was exhausted by a century of near-constant warfare with Byzantium. The two great powers had bled each other white. And from the Arabian desert, a new force was gathering that neither of them had anticipated. Iran had just reached the peak of its post-Alexandrian reconstruction, which made what came next, in 636 CE, all the more devastating. At a place called Al-Qadisiyah on the edge of the Mesopotamian plain, a Sasanian army met an Arab Muslim force in battle. The Arabs won. Within 15 years, the entire Sasanian Empire had collapsed. The last emperor, Yazdegerd III, hunted across his own kingdom, was murdered by his own subjects in 651 CE. The Arab Caliphate now controlled Iran. This was, by any measure, the most dramatic rupture in Iranian history. A civilization that had been ruling itself, in one form or another, for nearly 3,000 years. Now governed by people who had been desert nomads within living memory. And yet, two words. In this story, they carry more weight than almost any army. And yet, within one generation, the Iranian administrative class had made itself indispensable to the Arab rulers. The caliphate needed people who knew how to run an empire. Scribes, accountants, tax collectors, diplomats, engineers. The Arabs were conquerors of genius. They were not yet empire managers. The Iranians were. The most powerful family in the early Abbasid Caliphate, the Barmakids, who effectively ran the empire's day-to-day affairs for decades, was Iranian. Let that land. The family running the Arab Empire, day-to-day, for decades, was Persian. Arabic became the language of religion and formal scholarship. But Persian never disappeared. It survived as a living tongue. A literary language. The private language of Iranian identity. And then came the backlash. Iranian intellectuals and poets began producing works in Persian, explicitly about being Iranian. About the pre-Islamic past. About the kings and heroes of the old empire. About a culture that predated the Arabs by thousands of years. This movement did not call for rebellion. It called for recognition. It said, in effect, we were great before you arrived, and we will be great after you. And then one man sat down to write. And what he produced would outlast every empire on earth. In the year 1010 CE, a poet from the province of Khorasan completed a work he had been writing for 30 years. His name was Abolkasem Ferdowsi. His work was the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. 50,000 couplets. The entire story of Iran, from the beginning of time to the Arab conquest. Written in Persian so pure, so deliberately free of Arabic loanwords, that scholars would later say Ferdowsi almost single-handedly saved the Persian language. Ferdowsi worked in poverty. Not for glory. Not for gold. Because a civilization's memory is its most fragile and most essential possession. He was not commissioned by a great patron for most of his life. He wrote the Shahnameh as an act of cultural preservation, to ensure the old Iran would never be forgotten. Let this moment linger. A single poet, working in poverty for 30 years, did more to preserve a civilization than any general or king who came before him. While Ferdowsi was writing, something else was happening on the political level. Iranian dynasties were reasserting themselves within the structure of the caliphate. And under their patronage, Persian literature truly flourished. The philosopher Ibn Sina, born in 980 CE near Bukhara, trained under the patronage of the Samanid court, produced the Canon of Medicine, a systematic medical encyclopedia that remained a standard teaching text at Bologna, Montpellier, and Oxford until the 17th century. He was a product of this same Iranian Renaissance. Iran had been conquered. Iran had not been destroyed. Iran was producing the most sophisticated intellectual culture in the known world, which brought it, inevitably, to its most savage test. In 1220 CE, the armies of Genghis Khan swept into the Iranian world. What followed was, by any historical measure, one of the most catastrophic events in the history of civilization. Great cities, Nishapur, Merv, Balkh, Herat, were destroyed. Libraries burned. Irrigation systems that had sustained Iranian agriculture for centuries were demolished. The Persian chronicler Juvayni, writing in his Tarikh-i Jahangasheh within decades of the invasion, described the destruction as beyond reckoning. Nishapur alone recorded in some accounts at over 1 million dead, a figure historians debate in its precise scale but none dismiss in its catastrophic weight. Merv, which had been one of the largest cities in the world, was effectively annihilated. By any rational measure, this should have been the end. And yet, Within 50 years, the Mongol rulers of Iran had converted to Islam. Within 50 years, they were speaking Persian. Within 50 years, the Ilkhanate, the Mongol dynasty governing Iran, had Iranian administrators running its affairs, Iranian architects building its cities, Iranian poets writing at its court. The Mongol ruler Ghazan Khan, who converted to Islam in 1295, did not simply adopt a new religion. He adopted Iran. He rebuilt cities. He patronized Persian art and scholarship. The destroyers had become the patrons. The men who had burned the libraries were now building new ones. In the span of a single lifetime, the conqueror arrives. The conqueror destroys. The conqueror stays. The conqueror becomes Persian. The final great reconstitution of Iranian identity came in 1501. A young man named Ismail, head of a Sufi religious order, rode out of northwestern Azerbaijan and began conquering. Within a decade, Shah Ismail I had unified the Iranian plateau under a single ruler for the first time in nearly 1,000 years. But what he did next was not merely political. It was civilizational. He declared 12 Shia Islam the official religion of Iran. 4 words. But those 4 words drew a line around Iran that no subsequent empire could ever quietly erase. The Ottoman Empire to the west was Sunni. The Mughal Empire to the east was Sunni. Iran would be Shia. This was not simply a theological distinction. It was a permanent, unmistakable boundary. You could conquer Iran. But you could not quietly fold it into your empire without an identity crisis that would outlast your lifetime. Iran had made itself unconquerable by absorption. Under the Safavids, the arts reached new heights. Carpet weaving, miniature painting, tile work, poetry, philosophy. The great city of Isfahan, rebuilt as the Safavid capital under Shah Abbas I, became one of the most beautiful cities in the world. The Persian saying dates from this period: Isfahan is half the world. And when the Safavid dynasty finally fell to an Afghan invasion in 1722, Iran did what it had always done. It reconstituted itself. Within 15 years, one man had done what standing armies could not. Nader Shah Afshar, from the northeastern province of Khorasan, raised an army, expelled the Afghans, drove the Ottomans back, and pushed the Russians out of the northern territories. In 1739, he invaded India, defeated the Mughal emperor at the Battle of Karnal, entered Delhi, and carried back to Iran perhaps the greatest collection of war prizes in modern history, including the legendary Peacock Throne, which became the symbol of Iranian royal power for 2 centuries. The message to every neighboring power was unmistakable. Do not mistake recovery for weakness. Iran was not a civilization in decline. Iran was a civilization in recovery. And there was a difference. So what is the thread that runs through 5,000 years? Connecting Cyrus to Ferdowsi to the Safavids to the present day? It is this: Iran survived not because it was unconquerable, but because it was unassimilable. Every great empire that conquered Iran found itself, eventually, managing a civilization older, deeper, and more complex than its own. A language, Persian, so refined and beautiful that conquerors chose to write poetry in it. An administrative tradition so sophisticated that no empire could function without it. A religious identity so distinct it could not be quietly absorbed without leaving a trace. The Arabs brought Islam, and Iran, in return, became the intellectual engine of the Islamic world. Its philosophers, physicians, and poets would shape Islamic thought for centuries. The Mongols brought devastation on a scale few civilizations have survived. But within 2 generations, their rulers were speaking Persian, building Persian cities, and patronizing Persian art, transformed by the very culture they had tried to erase. The Turks brought new dynasties. Those dynasties adopted Persian as their court language, Persian aesthetics as their imperial vision, Persian architectural logic as the blueprint for their grandest buildings. The pattern held every time. Not through resistance, but through irreplaceability. Persian was the administrative language of the Mughal Empire in India. Persian poetry echoed through the courts of Central Asia. Persian architectural principles shaped the mosques and palaces of the Ottoman world. The reach of Iranian civilization extended far beyond Iranian borders, not through conquest, but through the quiet, irresistible force of cultural prestige. In the very long run, across 5,000 years of conquest, collapse, and reconstitution, the thing that proved most durable was not an army, a fortress, or a throne. It was a poem. A language. An idea of what it meant to be Iranian. 5,000 years is a long time to remain yourself. Most civilizations do not manage it. Most are absorbed, erased, or simply forgotten, their languages extinct, their gods replaced, their stories surviving only in the footnotes of the people who conquered them. Iran is different. And the reason Iran is different is not a mystery, though it is often treated as one. It is the consequence of a choice, made by generation after generation, to keep writing in Persian when Arabic was the prestige language of the known world. To keep telling the old stories when the new rulers preferred new ones. To staff the empires that conquered them, not as submission, but as infiltration. The conquerors came with armies. Iran fought back with poets, philosophers, administrators, and architects. And in the long run, in the very long run, the poets won. Thanks for watching, and always know that you are the reason why we are here burning our candles on research to make sure we bring you the little to untold history documentaries that we believe you need to hear. You are the backbone of this channel. Remember to like, subscribe and share to help us reach more people who might need to see this video.